Hello everyone, and welcome back to MIS 5000, Special Topics in MIS. Today we're going to be discussing how to read and write files in Python. The learning objectives for this module are as follows. After this module, you should be able to define and identify the current working directory, define and use absolute and relative file paths, open a file with the open method in Python, read the contents of a file in Python using the read method, close a file in Python using the close method, and write to a file in Python using the write method. You may already be familiar with navigating the directories on your computer. If so, this will be a review. So when we talk about files, a file has two key properties. It has a name or file name and a path. The path specifies the location of the file on the computer. So for example, if we take a look at the file project.docx, it is located first in the directory of C, then users, then a swigart, then documents. The part of the file name after the last period is called the file extension, which tells you a file's type. For example, this is a docx file that can be opened in Microsoft Word, and we've been working with .py files that are Python files. Let's talk about the current working directory. Every program that runs on your computer has a current working directory. Any file names or paths that do not begin with the root folder or the top of the file hierarchy are assumed to be under the current working directory. So if we are currently in the Documents folder and are accessing project.docx, our current working directory would be Documents. More specifically, it would be C, Users, a swigart, Documents. Let's talk about the difference between absolute and relative paths. When you're working with files in Python, it can be useful to use either the absolute or the relative path name to specify a file path. The absolute path always begins with the root folder. This is essentially an exact address that tells you where the file is located. If we take a look at the examples on the bottom here, we have this spam.txt that is located at the absolute file path C, bacon, fizz, and then we have the file spam.txt. The absolute file path for spam.txt here would be C, eggs, and finally you have the file name. So the absolute path will always begin with that root folder. A relative path, in contrast, is relative to your current working directory. You can see that there's some additional notation here using dots and slashes to help us navigate around the current working directory. Let's say, for example, that we want to access this spam.txt file here, and our current working directory is this bacon folder. In order to access the spam.txt file from the current working directory, which is the bacon folder, we need to use a / before the file name. Let's take a look at another example. Our current working directory is still this bacon folder, and we want to access this spam.txt. In order to do that, we need a / to enter the fizz folder, and then another / to access spam.txt. So if you're going down a level from the current working directory, you're going to use that / to access either the file if it's directly in that directory, or a / in front of an additional directory and then the file name. The / is used if we need to move up to a parent folder. So again, take bacon as the current working directory. If we want to access this spam.txt folder at the bottom, we have to first enter the parent directory, which is C, and then access the spam.txt folder. So a simple .. takes us out of bacon into C, and spam.txt allows us to access that there. So use a .. when you need to go up a directory, and a / when you need to enter another directory that is below. If you don't have a lot of practice accessing file path names on your computer, go ahead and see if you can complete this example. So referencing your last homework assignment, see if you can find the absolute path of that assignment. What is the file name, what is the absolute path, and what is the file extension? The file extension will likely be a .py or a .zip. The file name may be your name.py, and the absolute path should include the root directory, so that will vary from person to person, include all the lower directories, and end with the file name. In order to process files in Python, we have an outline of the general process. So first, we would call the open function to return a file object, then either use read or write on the file object, or both, and then close the file by calling the close method on the file object. The open function can take two arguments. The first will be the file path. This could be the relative or the absolute file path, including the file name, and can include a second argument to specify permissions on the file that you're opening. So if you want to be safe and make it read-only, you can use an R as that second argument. To open a file, pass either the absolute or the relative path as a string, indicating the file you want to open. Once the open function is called, it will return a file object. Let's take a look at an example. So I have provided a very simple cookies.txt file on Blackboard in the module. Go ahead and download that and save it in a location where you know the absolute path. So for example, just on your C drive. Then write the following in a Python program and run after inserting the actual absolute path. So we're going to say f, which will become our file object, equals open, and then you'll have the two arguments, the first a string indicating the path, and the second indicating that we just want to read the file. So I've queued up this example in Python. You can see on the left in my Explorer that I have the file that I'm working in. You can actually see my current working directory down here, which is MIS 5000 applications, as well as the series of folders that this Python file is in and the location of the cookies.txt file that we want to access. So what I've done here is used escape characters to represent each of the slashes where necessary. I have located the absolute path, which is C, users, some initials, iCloud Drive, desktop, GSU, MIS 5000 applications, RW, and finally the file name with extension, followed by an R character as a string to indicate that I want it to be read-only. If I go ahead and run this, you see that nothing really happens. I've just read the file in. The other thing I want to make sure I do is close the file when I'm finished with it, so I can simply call f.close to do so. Go ahead and run that again just to show you, and nothing happens, but we did open and close the file. I'm going to go ahead and show you the relative path method here as well, so I'm just going to comment this out, and we'll use f equals open. Now this is a little tricky because the current working directory, even if I change it down here, it always seems to default to MIS 5000 applications, so I have to keep that in mind. So in order to get to the cookies.txt file, what I need to do is use / to go down a level into RW, and then access cookies.txt from there. So let me go ahead and show you how that works. So I have a /, remembering to use 2 slashes for the escape character, RW, which is the folder name, another / for the escape character, and finally the file name cookies.txt. I'll go ahead and add that second argument to make it read-only and run it. And you can see that it did compile successfully. Now that we've opened the file, we now have a file object and can start reading from it. So if we want to read the entire contents of a file as a string value, we can use the read method. So we're going to add the following code to read the file and store the resulting contents in a variable called text. Simply text equals f.read. So text will be our string variable that contains all of the text in the file. Let's go ahead and add that line. So we'll say text is equal to f.read. If we want to see the result, we can simply print text to the screen and run it. And you can see all of the text. So this is all one string, including new line characters set at the edge of each line to get this text to generate as it is stored in the text file. We have already used the close method, but remember to use the close method to close the file when you no longer need its contents. This will make sure that you aren't taking up memory space unnecessarily. So simply f.close, or whatever your file name is. Here I've provided a reminder of what the split string method does. We can use the split method to split the file by lines to make it easier for us to process. So in this case, our delimiter is going to be the new line character. We're going to use this shortly while we finish our example. So let's take a look at this example. We've already completed some of this. So using the cookies text file, do the following. Read in the file and store the result in a variable called text. We've already done this. Next, use the split method to create a list of each line in the file. Let me go ahead and copy these instructions over and we'll finish this out. Okay, so I've copied over the instructions. We're now going to use the split method to create a list of each line in the file. So we want a list where each element is one of these lines. So we're going to have a list with 10 elements. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this print statement, and I'm going to call the list lines, and we'll say lines is equal to text.split, and I'm going to include that new line character as our delimiter. Go ahead and print lines to double check before we move on. Go ahead and run that, and you see the result I get is in fact a list here with 10 elements. Each element is a line in that text file. So next we're going to print each list value to the console using a for loop. So we're going to do that in the following way. So for line in lines, you could also use I, doesn't matter. I'm going to ignore the index here because I don't think I need it. And we'll just simply say print line. You'll see that when I run this, it prints each line on top of one another as it runs in the for loop. Next, so in the same loop, count the number of each type of cookie. So we have chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, sugar, and peanut butter. So before I do anything, I'm going to add some counter variables for each cookie type. So we'll have CC equal to 0 for chocolate chip, oat equal to 0 for oatmeal raisin, S for sugar equal to 0, and PB equal to 0 as well. So we're going to use these to keep a running total of the types of cookies. Now I can see the text here, so I know what I have to check for. And this will be similar to those if and elif statements that we had early on in the course. So in the same loop, we're going to count each type of cookie. So let's go ahead and do that in the following way. So if I'm going to use in to check, so if chocolate chip in line, remember because each line is an element in the list, then we're going to say CC equals CC plus 1. Elif oatmeal raisin, remember to spell it correctly, in line, oat equals oat plus 1. Elif, check my spelling here, sugar in line, S equals S plus 1. And finally, elif peanut butter in line, PB equals PB plus 1. Go ahead and run that just to check to see that it's working, and it is. Finally, print the result of the cookie count for each cookie type. So let's go ahead and do that at the end here outside of the loop. So we'll go ahead and print chocolate chip plus, remember to cast as a string, CC. And I'm just going to copy this a couple of times. So next we have oatmeal raisin. I'm going to change the variable shortly. Sugar. And at the bottom, peanut butter. Change these variables to oat, S for sugar, and PB for peanut butter. Let's go ahead and run that. And you see I get some counts at the end here. So chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, sugar, and peanut butter. I have 10 total. So we have 3, 2, 2, and 3, which adds up to 10. So that checks out. So far all we've done is read in text, and we've processed that text by simply making word counts. Next, we're going to take a look at writing some results to another file. So let's first take a look at how to write to files. So to write to a file, first make sure that the file you're writing to has write permissions. You can do this by using the W parameter when opening the file. So for example, f equals open results.txt, comma W, f write hello, and then close. You can read from one file and write to a different file. So as we're going to see in our example, we've opened a file and we've stored it in F. We can also open a results.txt file, which we've not created yet, but that this will automatically generate. Can store that in G and give it write permissions. We can read in the text from cookies and then write that text to the results file and then close that file. Let's go ahead and do this as a test example before we try something more complicated. So we're simply going to open the cookies.txt file. We're going to generate a results text file that we write what we read from cookies to. So I can simply add this to what we currently have without changing anything. So let's add g equals open. Now I want the results to be in the same directory as cookies.txt. So to do that, for me, I'm going to use a /, making sure to use the escape character, put it in my RW folder, another // and results.txt, add that write permission. And at the bottom, I'm going to make sure that I close that file as well. So we'll add g.close. Next, all I'm going to do is directly after the text equals f.read line, I'm going to just say g.write and put text in as an argument. I'm going to go ahead and run this, and what you'll see is it does all the processing we originally had, and we now have this results.txt file. If I click on it, I can see that it actually has all the same text that the cookies text file had as well. So we have successfully read in cookies and printed it out into results.txt. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that line because we're going to do some additional manipulation. So let's take a look at our final example. We are going to do all of the same tasks that we previously did. So read in the file, cookies, split the text, print each list value, count the number of each type of cookie. But now what we're going to do is we're going to write the results of those cookie counts into results.txt in the current working directory. So let's take a look at how that will work. I do have the results as output. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to store all of this text in one string variable and then write it to G. So I'm going to do that in the following way. I'm going to make a new variable called results and set it equal to the string. What I'm going to do is take each of these, so chocolate chip plus the count, and I'm going to concatenate a new line onto that as well using that escape character. I'm then going to add the next line, so oatmeal raisin plus string oat, add another new line, and there are of course other ways of accomplishing this. This is only one way. I'm going to leave it on this line so you can actually see it. So plus sugar, add another new line, and then finally peanut butter, and I don't have to add a new line there. Now I do have to move this back up. Okay, so now that I have it all on one line, I can run it. Next, what I'm going to do is say g.write and then write the results to G. So what will end up happening is results.txt will be completely overwritten, and it should have our output written to it. So let's go ahead and run it and then check out our results file, and you can see that we do in fact have the results there. So this should give you information as to how to read in files. So the same technique applies to CSVs as it does to TXT. You'll just have a different file extension. You'll need to be able to either use absolute paths with escape characters or relative paths, also with escape characters, in order to navigate to the file that you want and the file that you want to write to as well. I'll go ahead and post this example to Blackboard, and please let me know if you have any questions.